Europe Roundtable on Sportsbooks.
Welcome, SiGMA Europe delegates. This is Becky Ligerro. I am the lead reporter for calvinair.com. We are here today for the Europe Roundtable on Sportsbooks, and I am joined by three fantastic C-level leaders in the sportsbook industry. And what I wanted to start off with today is to have my three panelists introduce themselves and give a few words to our audience here as to what their presence is in the European sports betting market. So let us start with you, Rob Dowling.
Hi, I'm Chief Commercial Officer for Singular. Singular is a platform provider and sportsbook provider, so mostly on the software provisions for our clients. We are not the strongest providers in Europe. Our clients are mostly outside of Europe, but having been in the industry for such a while, I have a lot of experience that I can generate towards the span.
Amazing. Paris, please.
I am the CEO of Pinnacle. We have our Maltese license, and we've really been focusing on more of a European-centric product. It's a huge market for us, and it's we're constantly trying to improve.
And Jesper, please.
Hi, so I'm Jesper. I'm the CEO of Betsson Group, and we are mainly European operator. We are in some other parts as well, but most of our business is here in Europe, and we have our own sportsbook as well. We develop it in-house.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. And today we really wanted to start off on a positive note. It's been a difficult year for many people. Obviously with COVID around, but the sports betting industry, the online sports betting industry is actually doing quite well. And so I just want to say to the three of you here, you should all be very proud. And our industry as a whole should be proud because, like I said, we're doing well right now. So what I wanted to ask the panel here today to start off is why? Why are we doing so well? What role are online sportsbooks playing in a time when people are really limited in the social activity that they can have and just any sort of entertainment that they can have? So we will start here with Rob.
Well, from a software perspective, obviously, we look at it like we are coming into people's houses, we're giving them entertainment value, we're generating, let's say, websites, using it on a generic term, that keep people entertained, keep people distracted to a certain extent, and obviously, because Europe is such a regulated market, we're trying to do it within a way that we don't overexpose them too much. Obviously, this is more the responsibility of operators, which here we have two phenomenal operators sitting down on the European market, and I think I would let them now say how they actually entertain people as well.
Wonderful. Paris, can you please start kicking us off with that?
We have to begin with the resilience of the sports. The fact that they're up and running and there's so many things that are shut down, I'm so grateful, I'm sure we all are, that we've got the football season coming on the European side. And of course, for Pinnacle in particular, the esports has been resilient through the entire time of the pandemic, so of the shutdown. So for us, it's been, the biggest highlight has been esports, but just in the way all the other sports have come back on board, and the efforts that all the different providers and the different sports leagues have put forward to allow us to be able to continue. But then of course you just get that engagement. People need to connect with something. This is a really, from a mental health perspective, this is a crazy time, and something that helps everybody is the familiarity and that connection. So, I think we've all been able to maximize the opportunities with that, and, not as an opportunity, but also to be there as support for people.
Very good. Jesper?
Yeah, no, I agree. We are providing online entertainment, and I also think, all three of us are representing digital companies in this sense, and digitalization in general has got to push forward during this time, and we're actually all benefiting from that. Of course, if you're a big land-based business today, it's much more difficult than what we have been having. So the digital side of gaming has once again proven to be, not just resilient versus recessions and so forth, but even in the pandemic, we are doing well, and that's something I think we should all be very happy about and proud about. And people in a time like this, they need to be entertained, and I think we are filling a really important role in doing so.
Wonderful. And I think it says a lot about you as leaders, as I know that the online gambling industry has been through quite a lot. The pandemic is not the first big challenge that we've had. I know Paris for sure. You remember UEFA? And we always come out on the other end doing very well. So congratulations, guys, and the industry as a whole here. But as we were saying as a panel here, we are an entertainment industry. That's for sure the best way to look, I think, is what we're doing. And since we've been doing well, you've been able to focus on refining your products, on innovating as opposed to worrying about making cuts or laying people off. So what kind of cool, innovative products and interesting ways have you learned to engage customers in the time that we've had this year? Let us start this time with Jesper. We'll continue with you.
I think, I mean, in general, we see a big demand for our traditional products. That is what is driving most of the business. But virtual sports and e-sports and those type of verticals are now significantly bigger than what they used to be. So you can see that the expansion of the offering has had an important role in this, and obviously the innovation around more markets in relation to that expansion. But I would say that innovation is perhaps not the biggest driver. It's just the traditional products that getting more and more interest. If I see the trends I'm looking at.
Very good, Paris.
Yeah, I agree. It's innovation. I think it's more survival. You know, when we looked at increasing the quality of our products, part of that motivation was to engage all of our traders, so we wouldn't have to lay people off, and we wouldn't. You know, we could continue to keep the organization motivated. We have, you know, from an innovative perspective, we've been able to research different options and tools that we've been looking at for a period of time from the marketing and the CRM perspective, sorry. So I think, you know, this extra time has, you know, when you start digging in survival mode, you know, during this time, I've reached out to Jesper just for some mental support. But it was also, you know, just to try to, you know, to kind of bring ourselves to a different strategic level, because otherwise you just get stuck in what's actually happening around you. And I think we all needed that little extra support to look out and figure out, okay, where are we are gonna get through this, and then what are we gonna do once we get through it, and how can we support each other in the process?
Yeah.
Really nice point, Paris. Thank you. And Rob, what do you have to add from a supplier perspective?
From our point of view, we saw a big shift of people wanting to introduce, obviously, a lot of new products to the market, and there was a lot of vendors obviously approaching us with a lot of interesting and dynamic product that was not just esports or not just virtual games. There were alternative products that were just had that slight edge or something over something else, and we found that players really responded to them very well. And what was really nice as well was the ease of which we managed to get everything integrated very quickly, because we did do, I think it was 3 months, or 2.5 to 3 months, where there was no traditional sports. There's nothing happening around. So being sportsbook people, we need sports to happen. So we jumped on the bandwagon, let's say, and we did that. We rolled up our sleeves, got down to work, and we found a lot of help from everybody. We found a lot of help from the vendors, who were actually there saying, okay, it's our API, it's your API, who cares? Let's get it up and running, let's get the business going. And that was the most important thing. And also what I found was, as Paris said, there was a lot of moral support from everybody around. Everybody was willing to have really nice, long conversations and giving advice, not just the usual competitors. And we look at each other and talk at conferences and, oh, I'm bigger than him, whatever. It was more a level of let's sit down, let's have a conversation over a cup of tea or a beer on Friday via Skype, and let's see how we can fix this problem, or let's see how we can move forward. And I found that this was one of the beauties of what happened during COVID as well. A lot of conversation was created, and a lot of small companies that had an innovative and great product managed to get their product out with the big boys as well, not just the small innovative sites, but the big people were putting in all this innovative product, which I think changed the landscape a little bit in sports betting as we know it today. Today we have a much more, let's say, interesting product.
Very nice. And I love hearing that you guys all help each other out. That makes me happy and proud to be part of this amazing industry that we all love so much.
We are a small industry.
Yes, we are. But another really a good thing that I think that you guys have all been doing is being responsible in the way that you offer products to your customers. I know particularly in Europe, this is actually an area where regulation is a good thing. We have to look out for our customers. But I wanted to hear from you guys, how do you think we've been doing? I mean, I don't want to hammer this topic into the ground here because there's quite a few sessions dedicated to regulation as a whole. But I guess maybe what lessons do you have to teach our American friends out there that are a bit newer to this space, that are worried about responsible gambling, they're worried that they don't want to entertain, too much, right? So what are some lessons and some tips that you could pass on to our friends in the US? I'll start with Jesper.
So I think any regulation has to be a healthy regulation, of course for the customers, but for the companies there as well. And if it's too much limitation, you will see that the customers, they will find places to play that is not within the regulation, and that's not good for the regulator, it's not good for the regulated companies and so forth. So it's a fine balance to hold up. And I also think what regulators will find out is that the companies that are seeking to be regulated locally, they are also in general very responsible companies and operate with a high standard and high integrity of how you treat the players. And I think the industry have been doing really well during this period of time in being extra cautious and extra responsible when looking at the customers and so forth. So for the regulators, it's a fine balance to make it attractive for companies without limiting the will of the players in that sense. And here you can see that there are some. If you look at Europe today, some are doing it well and some are struggling a bit more, I would say.
And Paris?
I think Jesper encompassed everything very nicely as it pertains to the regulators. But as far as some advice to the U.S., as that's so new, is don't wait for it, do it. If you wait for it, then it's going to be pushed upon you, from people that don't truly understand it. So if you progress it in what we're currently doing in the European market, what are the norms, and just be at the forefront of it, I think it's going to be a lot more beneficial in the long run for the operators.
And Rob, our supplier perspective?
Well, I think it's been put wonderfully by Jesper and Paris. Obviously, from a supplier perspective, from a software perspective, I would say please harmonize the software. It would make life so much easier. But then again, everybody has their own agenda, everybody has their own ways of seeing things, and everybody defines things the way they want to define them. So that's the beauty of humanity, I would say.
Very good, very good. And as we said, regulation is good and it helps with things like responsible gambling, but too much regulation can be very disruptive to our industry as a whole. I know Europe is a super complicated part of the world right now when it comes to different regulations and some stricter ones popping up here and there. What are some of the perils of regulation when it just gets too crazy? I mean, what happens? Paris, for example, what does an organization like yours do when the jurisdictions you're operating in just get too out of control?
We pull away from that jurisdiction. We just, there's no choice. It's, when a regulator becomes a dictator, that's where it doesn't make sense from a business perspective to continue. And that's with regards to all the stringent, regulations. It's the fines, are we working together? There's so many regulators where we've looked at getting licenses for Pinnacle, and we ask them, okay, well, what do we have to do to prevent that? Well, you'll find out when it happens. That's literally an answer from a regulator. Now that can't make any sense to anybody. And, there's other operators that have pulled out of jurisdictions, some that we know well, and I just think that that's going to be the trend. And that jurisdiction then runs the risk of allowing other companies that aren't trying to be black and white, just to come in and inundate the market, and then they're back at square one. So it's interesting how in the beginning, there's a great intent, and then it just keeps spiraling out of control, and and it ends up being the end of the jurisdiction.
Yeah, and Jesper, can you elaborate on this? I know that you're leaving the UK. Can you talk to us from Betsson's perspective?
I can just give another example before that happened in about around April, May, and that was one regulated. We're operating in Latvia, and Latvia decided to revoke all the licenses, the local licenses for online gaming companies. So we, together with the other regulated companies, we were not allowed to operate during a period of time. And that was done, the government said, in order to protect the people during this difficult time. But it's very naive to think that the general population would stop to gamble. So what happened is that they stopped to gamble with any company that is regulated, because the only alternative they had was to go and gamble with companies that are not regulated in Latvia and so forth. So here, the whole locally regulated industry was penalized compared to the ones who are not having a local license though. So I think that's an example of how to not do it. If you want to have a successful local regulation, you get your taxes and you get the player protection you should have. But I think every market has to have its own balance in how to do this. But if that balance is not good enough, ultimately the ones who really want to do well and seek to, in this case, pay taxes, that's what local regulation very much comes down to, and protect then of course the players in that jurisdictions. You will lose out so much as a regulator, because you will not get any taxes, and the people within the regulation, they will not stop to gamble. They will just go to places where there's no regulation, basically. So I think I think there's a lesson learned for several, that you have to work with the industry, and you have to work with the part of the industry that seek regulation and operate with high standards.
Very good. And I think if we have regulations that are too strict, we're going to obviously have a bigger black market. So how is operators, and actually as an industry, because I'll include you with this, Rob, as well.
That's fine.
How do you manage the situation when you do have offerings from operators that are not licensed locally? How do you compete with these operators out there in the meantime until regulators get the situation together? Bob, go ahead.
As SiGMA, we've taken a decision that we only want to work with locally regulated operators. It was a decision very early on when we set up the B2B a year and a half to 2 years ago, and we stick to that decision. We obviously do get a number of people that do approach us with, I would like to enter certain markets via another license, and we turn that business away. And our head of legal obviously looks at me and says, thank you very much, that has avoided a lot of problems. But I do see the problem getting worse and worse with countries or with regulators that are getting a bit too stringent. Because there's a very old saying, and I think we all know it, is that necessity is the mother of all inventions. Because punters will obviously find ways to play, people will find ways to penetrate markets without necessarily the correct licensing, without necessarily correct attitude as well, and that is a very dangerous place for the player to be in, to be playing on sites that are not regulated, that don't actually protect them. Whereas, in my opinion, regulation should be there to protect the player and not just pay taxes. It should be a situation where some players, not all of them, are vulnerable and some players are weak. And regulation should remember that is what they're there for, to protect these players, and not just to increase in taxes and to make it harder to enter a market for a good startup maybe, or a good investment opportunity. Today some jurisdictions are getting more difficult, more expensive to enter, and your young ambitious startup that eventually might become a Pinnacle or a Betsson will find it very difficult to actually enter that, which stifles creation, especially from our end of software development. We've seen a lack of that. It stifles development of young entrepreneurs.
Very good, Rob. Thank you so much. And guys, this is actually our time for today. So I wanted to thank SiGMA so much for having us here. And thank you so much to you amazing panelists for making this a great discussion. And have a wonderful conference, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Becky.
you.